What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with Tech Daily, and in this video we're going to be doing a full camera comparison test between the iPhone 11 Pro, the Note 10 Plus, and the new Google Pixel 4. Right now, of course, we're doing a quick front-facing camera test, and we're recording at 1080p 30 FPS since that is what the Pixel 4 is limited to. We've got quite a bit of traffic behind me, a little bit of wind noise. So let me know which one of these phones looks the best and sounds the best with that front-facing camera.
So with that first video clip there, I think you can tell right away that these phones are pretty different when it comes to their camera capabilities. And over the past week or so, shooting countless pictures and video samples, I really noticed a difference with each of these devices when I started to compare the results. And I think as I go over all the samples I have here in this video, you guys will probably see those differences too. These are pretty much the top flagship smartphones right now, at least here in the US. And I'm really curious to see which of these devices you guys prefer. So let me know which phone you think did the best job in the comments down below. And without further ado, let's jump into some more samples. This set of pictures is just your regular selfie with the front camera. And right away, I think you're going to notice some defining characteristics with each of these images. The Note 10 Plus, for example, produces a really soft picture, and you can see that with my face. I almost look porcelain in comparison to the iPhone, where the lines in my forehead and my facial hair are significantly more detailed. But I think the most detail can be seen with the Pixel 4. It seems like every strand of hair on my head is individually visible. And keep in mind, this is just a regular old selfie with the front camera. We haven't even gotten to the good stuff yet. When we move over to a portrait selfie, I think once again you'll see that softening on the Note 10 Plus's image. The detail isn't quite there compared to the rest, but what is there is some seriously good edge detection, especially around the top of my head. The iPhone, for whatever reason, really missed the mark here. You can see that inconsistent blur in my hair that isn't happening with the Pixel or the Note. And speaking of the Pixel, once again, that detail is really impressive. I think it's just a bit better than the Note overall, and I really like what the Pixel 4 produced with this picture. Here's one more portrait selfie for your consideration, and once again, surprisingly, the iPhone had a little bit of trouble nailing down the edge around my hair. Meanwhile, the Pixel 4 and the Note 10 Plus both wound up getting that edge detection down a bit better, and once again, the softening with Note 10 pushes me more towards preferring the Pixel 4 with this set of pictures. Okay, let's jump to the rear cameras now, since I think that's what a lot of you guys are interested in comparing. I have a ton of samples here in all sorts of different conditions. Since there's so many, I'm gonna let a few click through here. Feel free to pause the video if you'd like, if you want to spend a moment comparing them for yourself. But there are quite a few that I do want to talk about. In general, I think you'll find that these phones do end up taking noticeably different shots, like I said, and one of the first things you'll probably see is the difference in the color of the sky. The iPhone this year has a more saturated look compared to the Note 10 and the Pixel 4, which is sort of surprising. We haven't really seen that in years past, but I think it's pretty obvious just how bright and blue the sky looks in comparison to the other two phones in a lot of these shots. Another thing I noticed pretty consistently throughout these samples was that the Note 10 Plus was often the brightest picture in the bunch. And in some instances, that's not a bad thing at all. It tends to produce an image that grabs your attention a bit more, and some folks might definitely prefer that brighter image. But from time to time, the Note did feel a bit overexposed, like in this shot, for example, where the people at the bottom are a bit washed out. Of course, they aren't the focal point of this shot, but they are still an element there in the picture. And when stacked up side by side against the Pixel and the iPhone, that overexposure is pretty obvious. Factors like exposure and color temperature, I think, are more of a personal preference than anything else, so long as they don't compromise the actual image. So while some people might prefer a brighter result, others might want a more natural look. And I think that's where the Pixel stands out most. Obviously, you guys weren't there when I took these shots, so you don't know how these scenes looked in the real world. But I found that the Pixel, more often than not, depicted any given scene more accurately to how it was in real life. Sometimes that meant that the final image was a little darker than what the Note gave, or a little less saturated than the iPhone, but that's okay. If you're going for accuracy, the the Pixel seems to be the one to tackle that best. Every once in a while though, I would come across a set of images that actually looked pretty similar to one another, like with this shot here. There's just an ever so slight difference in color and exposure, but overall it's really hard to tell these pictures apart, even as you start to analyze the little details. Each of these phones was able to capture the texture and pattern on the sculpture pretty well, even at a distance. I was probably 15 feet away from this thing, or maybe more, and it's really tough to argue one image over another in this particular example. On the other end of the spectrum, I would also come across pictures that looked very different from one another too. This shot here has the iPhone producing a shot that's significantly cooler than the rest, which results in what should be a gray sign and gray bricks looking a little too bluish. The Note 10 Plus here is also a bit cooler than it should be, but far less extreme. The Pixel 4 image on the left is certainly the most true to life, and I think overall just produced the better image in general. It's a similar story here too with this arch. The iPhone, while probably offering the most detail, just makes things look cooler and more saturated than they really are, while the Note and Pixel did a better job producing a more accurate image. Now, in years past, the Pixel has been the camera king, even having only a single rear lens, while other phones packed 2 or 3. This year, the Pixel added a second lens, a 2x optical zoom telephoto lens. And that means we can now compare some zoom capabilities a bit more fairly too. The iPhone 11 Pro and Note 10 Plus both pack a 2x optical zoom telephoto lens as well. And as we start to zoom in, I was really surprised to find that the Pixel 4 actually seemed to retain the most detail, even as it moved past the 2x optical zoom and ventured into its digital zoom. If you watched Google's keynote when they announced the Pixel 4, they did spend a few minutes hyping up their zoom capabilities, and I think for good reason. Personally, if I have to zoom in on something for whatever reason, I think I'm reaching for the Pixel over the iPhone and the Note. However, I don't really utilize that telephoto lens for zoom all that often. I much prefer a wide-angle shot. I think that has more practical uses for me, but unfortunately, that's not something the Google Pixel can do. It doesn't have the lens for it, and you can't imitate it with software. And it might not be fair for me to bring it up, but at the end of the day, it's a camera feature that the iPhone and the Note and a lot of other phones have that the Pixel 4 just does not. And the folks at Google even stood on stage and said they had no interest in bringing a wide-angle camera anyway. They preferred the telephoto. So it isn't something they're trying to hide or dismiss at all, which I can respect at least. And that's why I wanted to make it a point in this video. When we jump into some portrait shots with the rear camera, I think once again, you're gonna see some pretty significant differences with these phones. There's no limitations at all here, no matter what device you choose. So if you wanna snap a pic of your pet or a flower or a random object on the street, you can get that shallow depth of field shot and blurred background no matter what phone you have. The background blur is going to vary with the default shot on these devices. The Pixel tends to default to a very blurred background, while the Note isn't always as extreme. But each of these devices lets you adjust the blur after you take the shot anyway, so that's less of a factor and more of a personal preference or editing tool, I guess you could say. The important things to look for, I think, are once again the edge detection, that separation of the subject from the background, and the detail on the subject of the picture. I think the Pixel consistently had the most detail in each of these portrait shots, with the iPhone in second and the smooth and softened Note 10 pictures at a distant third. Interestingly enough, when it comes to portrait pictures with the rear cameras, the iPhone and the Note can switch between utilizing the telephoto lens and the standard wide-angle lens, while the Pixel only uses the telephoto lens now. With last year's Pixel 3 and Pixel 3a taking incredible portrait shots using just the single standard lens, I'm surprised this isn't an option. With the Note and the iPhone, you can sort of get a different portrait look depending on which lens you want to use. But with the Pixel 4, you have just one lens option to choose from. And as the lights go down, this is where I found the Note 10 start to struggle. This is an evening shot with a fairly bright light shining directly on me. And you can see that attempting to take a portrait mode picture with the Note yields a pretty terrible result. Detail is almost entirely lost, and the color, I think, is really off too. The Pixel did an amazing job keeping me well lit, and the picture looks great, but I think the iPhone is actually the most accurate here. Keep in mind also that these pictures don't utilize the dedicated night mode or night sight. These are just standard portrait pictures in low light conditions. Here is that same shot without the portrait effect, while instead utilizing night mode or night sight, and things look a little better for the Note, but still not all that great. The Pixel did another fantastic job with the lighting here, and I think this time I actually prefer that picture over the iPhone. When it comes to those nighttime and low light shots utilizing night mode or night sight, I think this is where you'll find the biggest difference in results. The Pixel and Note each have dedicated night modes, while the iPhone's only comes on when it feels like it's needed for the shot. And I think once again, the Note 10 Plus was able to brighten the shots more than the other two phones, but that wasn't always a positive. In this shot here, the Note was actually the only phone to even capture the scene, which was really surprising. And here's another example where the Note made the shot happen while the other phones struggled to bring out those shadows. But with the Note, as it started to increase the exposure, it tended to make the images pretty noisy, and sometimes it compromises the shot as a whole, especially when it comes to producing accurate colors and retaining detail. The iPhone pictures in low light with night mode tended to retain the most detail, but the Pixel, I think, still has the best balance of capturing the shot and brightening things up while keeping the important details too. Given my time with the iPhone these last few weeks, I thought I would prefer it over the Pixel for night mode shots, but I think after using the Pixel, I might prefer that phone over the iPhone for those low light scenes. Last but not least, let's talk about video for just a moment. Now, each of these phones can shoot 4K at 30 frames per second. The iPhone and Note can take things a step further and shoot in 60 FPS at 4K resolution, and they each have the specs and hardware you would expect, like OIS and all that jazz. But side by side, I noticed two distinct things with these phones. The Pixel 4, for whatever reason, has a bit of like warping or distortion when it comes to image stabilization from time to time, which makes things a little strange. And the Note 10 Plus tends to have these obvious shaky moments more often than the other two phones. The iPhone is certainly the best at offering a silky smooth shot, and it certainly is the most pleasing as far as color, but detail-wise, the Pixel, I think, once again has a slight edge. I hate to hate on the Note, but video has just never really been Samsung's strong suit. Of course, each phone has some special features like Samsung's ultra slow motion feature and Apple's slow motion selfies, and those are more gimmicky, I think, rather than features worthy of comparison, but that's just my thought, and I'm sure some of you guys might disagree with me on that. So there you go, that's what I have for you as far as pictures and videos with the new Pixel 4, the iPhone 11 Pro, and the Note 10 Plus. I think each of these phones does an excellent job, and really it's a matter of personal preference more than anything. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I'd love to know what phone you think did the better job. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure to follow Tech Daily on Twitter and subscribe to the Tech Daily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.